and welcome to my channel. I'm Fornax, and today I'm interviewing Fayrah, an enthusiastic role player and a YouTuber from the Guild Wars 2 community. There are timestamps below to indicate what we're chattering about at certain points of the interview, so you can jump to the parts that you're interested in. There are also links below to Fayrah's social media, including her YouTube channel and her role-playing podcast, RP Anonymous. There are also links to Guild Wars 2 RP community, which has been going strong since the beta. So welcome to the Herald YouTube channel. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Fayrah.
Is there an origin of your name?
It's actually, I took it from one of my prior characters. Before I came over to Guild Wars 2, I was RPing in another community.
What game were you playing?
It was Second Life.
Wow, I've never played that.
It's not really a great place to find actual roleplay. Like, there are some sections in Sims where role-playing communities are based, and my sister and I had actually made one like that. And we were using like the Bloodline system, which is like a HUD system for vampires in that game, so it was really easy to sort of incorporate that into a role-playing aspect. But most of Second Life is mostly just basically a social media type thing for like people in a virtual world. So it's like Facebook, but you get an avatar and you can walk around and stuff. So it's not really heavy for the roleplay, but there are some like little nooks and crannies where you can find it.
How long have you been like a role-playing gamer?
I would say probably like actual gaming since I joined Guild Wars 2, so about 4 years, but I've been role-playing for over 10 years.
And it was mainly in Second Life, or were you doing proper like pen and paper RPG?
I never actually did like sit down like pen and paper type of things. I always wanted to try D&D, which I'm actually doing now, but back then when I was first starting it, my first RP group was actually on MySpace.
Wow.
Like way back in the day.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And we actually used another little vampire section. One of the like little apps that you could play on MySpace was a vampire themed one, and you could join clans, and we all sort of like started this little like role-playing clan, and we were there. We were also on forums. And then we sort of took that to Second Life, and I was in Second Life for most of the time, but also doing like forums and stuff.
So officially, Guild Wars 2 was your first RPG kind of real in-game experience with Avatar. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. I did try World of Warcraft for about 2 hours, and then uninstalled that, but...
Yeah. I'm lost to it. World of Warcraft was my first game, really. I mean, I'd thrown Lara Croft off a few very tall buildings, but before that, World of Warcraft was my jam, and I still play today. So I'm hopelessly lost in that game. you got out early. That's a good thing.
I tried. Like I felt like it was more like if I had someone to run around with, it probably would have been better, but I was trying to level whatever character I had made, like in the little the demo that you can play like up to level 20, I think.
Yeah.
And I was like right in the starter area doing my first quest, and there were some people just ERPing right out in the open. I'm like, yeah, okay, no. And then I left.
Did you make a human character?
No. It was like some sort of like Fae type of thing.
Yeah, no, it's just as a insider joke. There's a place where human characters start, and there's a pub there that's notorious for that. It's alright. I mean, you believe it or not, when I first started doing the Crichton Herald, it was a news edition on in the first year that the game launched, and a guy who was running a kind of ERP kind of brothel was trying to get me to advertise his I don't know what to call it. His pimpdom, I think, is the best word. So, unfortunately, they're everywhere.
Was it in Divinity's Reach?
It was in Divinity's Reach.
God.
Yeah. I've just sidetracked my interview with the RP, right? So World of Warcraft wasn't your jam. So what was it about Guild Wars 2 that kind of hooked you in?
Actually, one of my friends, she'd been playing since the beta, and she and I would go on like hikes or whatever, and we'd talk about like the stuff we had been doing in our week. And for her, it was always Guild Wars 2 and RP. So she was telling me about all of the scenes that she had been doing, the plot lines that were going on with her guild. And I was just like, this is really interesting. And she was like telling me about the different races and sort of like equating them to me with different like references. Like I think the Char, she was like, they're kind of like the mentality almost like Klingons, where they're like very fighting and war based. I was like, okay, like, so she sort of related them to me in something that I could understand.
Yeah.
And then she just kept going on about her guild, and after a year I was like, oh my god, fine, okay, I'm buying this game. So, and her guild was a Sylvari Nightmare Court, so I was automatically sort of drawn that because most, if not all, of the RP I had done previously was all dark themed, vampire related. So dark RP is already my jam. So I was just like, Nightmare Court, okay, I can get behind that. So I went in with no real idea of the lore or anything like that. I had read very, very little information. All I had was what my friend had told me. And so I was just like, I'm just going to make a character who's literally a sapling and knows nothing about the world, so as she learns, I'll learn it too.
Yeah, that's a great plan,
Yeah, so...
So what was your friend's guild, if you want to give him a shout out, and your buddy as well?
She actually doesn't play anymore.
Oh, you can still give her a shout out and link to it. She might find it fun.
Yeah, hi Sarah. But the guild is actually dead on 2 levels. It's dead, but it was also called Dead.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was the Court of the Deadly Blooms, and the moniker was Dead.
That's awesome.
It was a small little guild. It was apparently larger before I joined, and I joined at sort of a rough patch, and a bunch of people split off and left, and I think maybe like 10 people were left after that. But it was a nice little small group. The court itself was based in Hullbrack, so I didn't get any of the like Sylvari NPCs to really talk to. I was all around the Norn. So, but that was fine. And it was a really nice little group, and it was like high intensity action, quote quote, almost from day one that my character was seeing, and she was just like, wow, this is intense.
So are you guilded at the moment? Are you in an RP guild?
Yeah, I'm in another court guild. I've been in 4 different court guilds, and right now I'm in 2.
You want to give him a shout out?
So I'm in my main guild that I'm actually an officer in, is the Pale Court, and we're recruiting always.
There will be links in the description below, so everyone head there, show them some love.
And the other court guild I'm in is the Court of Entropy, and that's mostly something just I do on the side with. She was originally my main character, the one I started with, Lily, and then I have 2 characters in Pale. Andrin, who is the most horrible person you will ever see. She's very much like, if you've seen Twilight, she's very much like Jane from the Volturi. And then Cassidius is my other character there, and he's where Andrin is more chaotic evil with everything she does. Cassidius is very lawful evil. And I think he's closer to lawful neutral than evil, but I mean, Nightmare Court.
Well, I mean, it's arguable that the Nightmare Court are just trying to be independent of the influence of an outside source. So
yeah. Oh, for sure. And that's one thing I like about the guilds that I'm in now, is because there are a lot of, well, I use a lot a little loosely, but there's like a lot of court guilds out there that are very edgy, for lack of a better word, and just really into like the evil and the torture and the darkness. especially with the characters that I have in Pale, and even Lily over in Entropy, they're very much like, yeah, they're courtiers, they're part of the Nightmare Court, but that's not all of who they are. Like, even villains have an aspect to them that has some sort of humanity. Like, they have reasons for what they're doing, they have goals, ambitions, they have lives outside of the court, and we sort of try to, like, explore them as whole individuals who happen to be part of the Nightmare Court.
Yeah, I think the best villains, they think they're the hero of their own story, right?
Mm-hmm.
The most interesting
for sure.
ones are not. I hate the kind of the Mary Sue villain who was just evil for evil's sake. I think Balthazar in the storyline kind of borderlined on that for this season. He was just a bit OTT without seeming to have any frame of reference in reality. But that's my critique of the story, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I also sort of like, every time I try to like explain the way that we sort of approach our characters, or the way I do anyway, it's sort of like in the movie Maleficent that came out years ago, it was sort of like, yeah, Maleficent, everyone knows this character, she's a horrible, evil person that does horrible, evil things, but that movie sort of like showed like, okay, but she didn't start out that way.
Yeah.
People don't just start out inherently evil. There are reasons for their progression and the path that they end up being on. Absolutely. While that one was more of a like redemption story for her, not like the Nightmare Courtiers are probably not going to get redemption stories because they're evil. Like that's the whole point. But yeah, it's just sort of exploring the other side of them, like, yeah, like there are times, like, especially I think the Pale Court, we're not very nightmare-y, quote quote, as some of the other courts. Like, a lot of the things we do are fun and amusing, with very little emphasis sometimes on actual nightmare things, but there are times where we do get really dark. Like, we're just now wrapping up a week-long dark vigil where it was just like horrible, brutal things. We had, for example, on Nightmare Court auction, we were auctioning off a bunch of like decorations that we had like spam made when I was trying to get to level 400 scribe, and that was horrible.
Oh.
But I mass produced a bunch of decorations, so we had a lot to just give out, so we were auctioning them off. And instead of them offering up like in character type of money or something like that, or anything of that nature, we were trying to put it on more of an even playing field, because some of the characters have businesses and run their own things and are very well off, and some of them have zero money at all. So we decided to put a nightmare twist on it, and we're like, okay, well, instead of money, you're going to be offering up parts of yourself. So you're going to injure yourself, and, you know, whatever harm you do is going to be the value that you put on this object. One person skinned himself or something. We're just like, dude, it's just a chair. I don't think it was for a chair, but it was sort of like, it was something, it was like that. Yeah.
So are all your characters related to the Nightmare Court? Do you have different characters? Do you have humans? Do you have Norns, so you could explore that kind of paradigm?
Most of my characters, the ones that I actively RP, they're all Nightmare Courtiers. I only have the 3. But I do have 3 humans that I've sort of set aside that I've wanted to RP with. One of each, like, heritage. Like, I have a Canthan, an Elonian, and a Crichton. I'm saving the Canthan for if we get a Canthan expansion.
Oh, fingers crossed, fingers crossed.
And the Elonian is sort of like, I have a slight backstory for her. She grew up in Babby, and she sort of worked in the necropolis, getting bodies ready for awakening or whatever. And there's actually a little joke guild that me and a few friends made called Joko.
Oh
and
my goodness.
We suddenly decided, like, hey, we've got this guild, we've got the guild hall. Why don't we, like, do some Joko RP? So me and a friend made the Elonians, and we were like, yeah, we're gonna do, we haven't done it yet, but we're looking into like doing some RP, like just fun little side RP with that.
Tell Ada she will be right there with you. She will be the only non-Joko acolyte on the planet.
As for Norn, I sort of like explored that a bit in my first year and a half in the game because Lily's court was stationed in Holbrack. And while I didn't actually have a playable character Norn at the time, I did sort of have an NPC that I created for Lily's story. And he was a blacksmith. He worked in like the market and he had his little forge and everything. And at first he just started out as Lily's boss. She was just sweeping around at a random forge with a random unnamed NPC. And what I would do, because I didn't have a lot of steady RP in the early days, and I'm very much of the mind that even though I'm not playing the character is still doing stuff. Like, the character has a life of their own.
That's the whole point of it, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I would be at work on my break, and I started doing some character writing. So I made a journal for Lily. And while I was on my break at work, I would be writing her journal, like the stuff that she was doing that day and her mindset and what she was thinking and feeling. And it also helped me, like, because Lily was not a fully fleshed out character when I started in Guild Wars 2. So that sort of helped me get an idea of who she was, where she was going, like all of these things that I usually already have planned out before I start playing a character. And so like through that, I was like, yeah, she sweeps up at a forge. And even though he was like an unnamed Norn, as the journal progressed, it actually became a thing where I ended up giving him a name. I ended up giving him like a whole backstory. And he ended up dying at some point, but now Lily runs that forge, and she's sort of like, she likes to consider herself part Norn because he sort of took her in almost like a daughter and taught her not only about blacksmithing, but a lot of life lessons. He was very much like a dad, so that was really cool and fun to explore.
That's one of the more interesting aspects about the Silvari, because they're both old and young at the same time because of the inherent nature of the dream and the awakening. It's interesting, isn't it?
There's an NPC outside the grove, or either I think it might be in the grove, but they mention how like they wake up and they know how to cook and do all of these like great things, but they have no idea how to do some basic thing like read. Or there's another one who can read and do all these other things, but they have no idea how to cook. So it's like they wake up with a bunch of information, but some of it's also lacking.
As a role player, do you feel like that you're actually a writer in disguise? That what you want to do is write stories?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, no doubt about it. And that's pretty much what, whenever someone, because I'm also in a PvE guild, and so when I try to explain role-playing to non-role players, that's basically what I say. Is like, you know, I'm a writer, I'm telling a story, but I'm not writing it just by myself. I'm writing it with other people. It's sort of almost like a co-op.
Some of the best role playing I've ever done is actually on forums, where we're telling a story together and playing off one another, and it's interesting, and you get to know people in ways that you wouldn't expect, I've found.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah, and you can find people who are just like really great at telling a story. You're just like, I cannot wait to do more scenes with this person.
So you said that you've written a journal. How much of your roleplay is being discovered in writings and, say, art and that kind of thing?
I would say lately not that much. I keep a journal for 2 of my characters, and nowadays it's mostly a way to catalog the scenes that I've done and sort of allow the characters time to reflect on the events. And formulate opinions, because like I've noticed that in reality, when things happen, sometimes it'll be like hours later, you're like, man, I should have said this thing, or you know what, that actually did tick me off a whole heck of a lot more than I thought it did. So
yeah.
So it's sort of like that, like opinions can change throughout the day, and I sort of like that dynamic, and sometimes they don't change and sometimes they do, but if I wasn't writing the journals or keeping up with that kind of, well, I haven't been keeping up with it, and so now I know that's like, it's a mess. But yeah, I think when I do actually keep up with the journals, half of my character's development and progress probably comes straight from just character writing.
That's really interesting. I mean, I've done quite a lot of like writing for that kind of thing, and I think it's just so absorbing. And I find it funny that people think it's strange to roleplay in a role-playing game.
Yeah.
Because the whole process is you make a character. This is your avatar in the world, and as I'm air quoting here, normal player, you go in and you play the story that somebody else is telling. Mm-hmm. But when you roleplay, you get to play the story that you're telling from your point of view, how you see the world. You know? Yeah.
That's like the whole thing, and sometimes like if you're just doing it like based off of the game story, you don't really get to dive in and explore a bunch of the factions. Like you don't get to explore necessarily the Order of Whispers or the Pact or any kind of like subplots or current events, only what the commander is doing in this case. Whereas if you decide to actively go in and roleplay, there are Pact guilds, there are various, I think there's like an Order of Whispers guild, like there's all these things where you can explore these, communities more in depth. And
when I was role-playing, there was the Crichton Ministry as well, who had ministers and voted for and minute takers and all sorts of, it was super in depth.
Yeah, there's a Seraph guild, there's so many things, and it's just, you don't necessarily see it when you're just straight playing the game. And it's not until you start like looking for it and realizing that all of these things are part of the bigger picture. And the fact that people can get so creative and love a game so much that they want to be here, they want to explore these like sections and factions, I think that's really telling of the game itself.
So what is it about Guild Wars for you that does it? What is the pull? What has made it such a rich role-playing experience for you, do you think?
I think part of it is the people that I found. I've role-played with a lot of people in this game, and some of them you can take them or leave them, but others are just really friendly and really great, and I've made some great friends from the guilds that I've been in. It's also, I love that for me, even as a role player, there's a ton of things I can do. Like if I have no scene to do, I can just go do fractals or something like that. So there's a lot of things to hold my attention. As far as role playing goes, I just really love the lore. Silvari are beautiful and gorgeous. And there's not a lot of customization, like as much as I would want, but there's definitely enough customization where I don't have any two characters out of like 20 that look alike. So that's pretty awesome too.
And we can sit down in chairs now.
We can sit in chairs now. Oh my gosh. I did a stream about it. I made a video about it. I was so excited. Like the second it hit, like I was the first one in my RP guild that actually was like, I was the first one that got the patch because there were people actually role-playing at the time. And when a patch hits in the middle of the scene, we wait until the very last second to get that patch. So nobody else had got the patch yet, and I patched it, and it was just like, guys, we can sit in chairs now. And everyone was just like screaming in the Discord, and everyone mass logged out to get the patch. And then like we all just like abandoned what we were doing and sat in every chair we could find. It was just like, yes.
ArenaNet, you need to fix the chairs in the Wolvie World Room because that is the best boardroom in the game. Just saying.
Yes. Seriously, we put plush chairs around the World to World table. Because we're just like, that's where we hold our court meetings, in the World to World room.
Yeah.
And so we just put out all the plush chairs. And we all sat down. It was just like, it's the first time we've been able to sit. For like, one of the characters is a second-born. And so he's like in his 20s, and then he sat down and she's like, yes, this is the first time I've been able to sit down in 20 years. It was wonderful. And like, we were so disappointed when, like, because we all split up and went to different like areas trying to do the achievement on day one, when most of the things out in the world didn't work. And we were just like, no, we where are these pirate chairs? Where else could they be but Lion's Arch? We were like looking in every place where there's a shipwreck or a pirate crew. Gosh, it was great though.
I know, Ada and I we went on the map, and she insisted that there be a human, a Silvari, an Asura, and a Char, so that she could see everybody sit on the different chairs. It was it was quite the bizarre guild live stream, I can tell you that much.
One of our guildies, he has like one of every race, so he brought in, like, it was like a revolving door almost. He brought in his Silvari first, and he brought in his Char. Poor Char, sitting in these chairs, they look like they're just stuffed in. They look so uncomfortable.
They look so prim. If anybody needs to manspread, it's a Char, okay?
Yeah. He just like stuffed his very large, bulky Char into this tiny plush chair, and he's just like, this is fine.
I know, but they do get futons in their own town, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, that's true. Gosh, the Asura sitting are so adorable. They're so tiny.
They are so sweet, yeah. Oh. Mean and evil, also cute and fluffy. Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't role-played, can you describe, you're talking about scenes. Now, I've done scenes. They're fun. And can you explain to people who are thinking about getting into the role-playing scene what playing scenes are and how you set it up, and the kind of the process of setting up a scene with your guildies?
So basically, a scene is basically a small story, or like a chapter of a book or a scene in a movie. So it's just a snippet of the greater picture. And when we want to do a scene, we mostly are thinking like, if we want to do something related to a plot arc, or if we want to do something that's just, fun, something that's just little something to occupy our time. So it just really depends on what we're in the mood for, and who you want to RP with, and who's available at the time.
So is there a plot that you follow? Have you decided the script beforehand, or have you decided the plot points from A to B where you want to go, and how you get there is your choice?
Sometimes. It just depends on what's going on in the guild at the time. There have been plot arcs that we've brought into the guild where we've actually planned them for, the most recent one that I helped plan was in the works for 6 months. And we did a ton of lore research aimed at please improve your lore. Yeah. Just on some things, just pretty please.
I tell you, World of Warcraft have just brought out a series of chronicle books, which is basically the history of the universe, and Guild Wars could really do with something like that, a source reference for role players. Yeah, and because our plot was about, we were doing it back in Living World Season 3, and it had to do with the current events, so the Bloodstone stuff, White Mantle, and Leyline and anomalies and stuff like that. So we were just like, okay, so we wanted to explore that, and we wanted to take the court to the Living World maps. So we were like, how are we going to do that? How are we going to interest this little group of nightmare courtiers that are stationed in Mount Maelstrom to venture out into the world and go to Bitterfrost Frontier, or go to Ember Bay and stuff like that? So we decided okay, well, that one of the ways we did that was bringing in my second character in Pale, Cassidius.
because he was sort of already looking into that, like just slightly. And it was also right when like Doric came out and the attack on Divinity's Reach. And Cassidius was actually in Divinity's Reach at the time, so he saw that attack. So we're like, okay, well, if we're getting them involved, then they're going to be needing to research Bloodstone and Leyline energy. How are they going to find the Bloodstone? They can find the Bloodstone in Lake Doric. How are we going to get them to Lake Doric? We can take a expedition scouting trip out there because there is that peach grove with the oak hearts and the magically infused peaches, and that might be of interest to Sylvari. So we used that as a point to get them to Doric. And at the time, another one of my characters, Lily, was actually in Pale at that time before she went to Entropy. And so she had already sort of done some prior research on leyline magic because she had been in the Maguma jungle during the Heart of Thorns story and stuff like that. So she was familiar with that on that level. So you just sort of try and find people or characters who have a little bit of background or prior knowledge and sort of try and find ways to weave them in or get them interested. And then you basically have your introductory scene. For us, it was a raid on a centaur camp that's directly below that peach grove with all the, like, it's basically where that leather farm is.
Yeah.
Or was. I don't know if it still goes. And there's a lot of Bloodstone crazed centaur there. And even just getting across Lake Doric to that peach grove, you see so many Bloodstone related anomalies and elementals and white mantle insanity going on. And it's like, that's all like sort of being tucked away into the characters' minds. Like, okay, they're seeing all of this. They can react however they want to. You're hoping they're going to react a certain way, but if they don't, you have other like sort of fail-safes along the path of the event to sort of be like, okay, well, hopefully from this event, they will not only collect supplies from this camp, which would include the Bloodstone, but they'll also notice like these centaurs are freakishly strong and glowing red, and that's not normal. And so that was sort of, that ended up leading into when they got the Bloodstone back to court, they started doing experiments with it to try and figure out what the centaur were doing to make them like that. And then we sort of paired that up with the leyline related research, which didn't actually get off the ground too much. But we plotted out, I think, 5 months worth of events that would happen every weekend. So basically, one event a week for, I think, 4 to 6 months worth of plot for like them to just sort of go through. And we had for each one what they would find and how that could progress the story.
And I guess it was an organic thing because you had to respond to how people were responding to the story.
Yeah, and that's one of the like big things about planning things like that is that you have to be aware that even though you put all of these little like nuggets of information and clues in the scene, the characters might not look at that at all. We had one event unrelated to the Bloodstone things where they went to go find somebody and they had to search the person's house. And we had all these little hints that were tucked away and we already had predetermined where they would be. But in order to find them, someone had to physically go like through certain cabinets, open certain drawers. And it's just like, they might not do that. So, and it's just like, you sort of like, when you get like to the point where they're like about to leave and nothing has happened, you're just like, no, I'm going to strangle you guys. Go back and get this letter.
So it's kind of, so if anyone's new to role playing, it's kind of like community theatre and improv and adventure.
Yeah, it's sort of like all of that plus aspects of D&D.
Yeah.
And it's just it can be a mess, but it's also a ton of fun.
Now, do you do all your correspondence, all your communications in type? Do you do it on Discord? Some people like to speak their roles.
It depends. Most of them are text-based. Most of them are in-game. Sometimes if we can't catch someone in-game, if you have busy IRL schedules, we'll just do a scene in Discord and type it out, like in a DM or something. Sometimes if we're really pressed for time and the scene needs to be done by a certain other event, or it's holding up progress for someone else's personal plot or something like that, then we'll talk it out. And sometimes we'll get into voice chat and like just communicate back and forth like what would happen in the scene. But then sometimes we also just like type it out, like, okay, well, my character would have been doing this, this, and that, and then like, okay, well, mine would do this in response to that. But sometimes we do like speak it out, but that's more rare. Most of it's all done in text.
What's your preference?
I prefer in-game text. Just because I've had so many people bail on Discord RPs because they either forget to respond, or they're not feeling it, or they're busy, and they just don't communicate with me that they want to wrap the scene, so it sits there for months. I'm just like, can we finish this? It got to the point where that was happening with so many people that I had to put like hard limits on my Discord RP, where I'm like, look, if it's not done within a week, we're taking it in game and I don't care. Like, or we're calling it. Like, that's one or the other. Because I had a character frozen in a Discord RP for like a month, and that was not a fun experience.
Oh, no. So I love roleplay. I started my guild life started day one in a roleplay guild, but I haven't been in the roleplay scene for a very long time. So if we have new players here listening, wanting to get involved with storytelling and roleplaying, as a person who does it a lot, what advice could you give them? So I'm thinking about, is there a community website where you would recommend they go to? Are there guilds?
There is.
And things
there's
like that?
Actually on Enjin, there's a website completely dedicated to Guild Wars 2 RP community, and it's literally called Guild Wars 2 Roleplayers. And they have it for the EU server, they have it for NA, and you can find, there's a guild directory, so you can look through basically every single in-game guild that is recruiting, and even some that aren't recruiting, but they do recruit sometimes. They're all listed there. If that's too intimidating for you, you can literally just go into the thread that says, I'm looking for a guild, and put up the character you have, what you're looking for, and people will grab you and be like, hey, this is my guild. I think that we could be a good match. Do you want to come RP with us? Check us out. And so you could do it that way. So you could actively go search, or you can just sit back and let them come to you. Which is what I think is a really good aspect of that website.
I've frequented that website before the game launched, and I have my thread is on there. My original thread back from 2012 is on there, so it's a good website. I do update my thread every now and then.
Yeah, it's really great. We actually advertise Pale over there, and the Court of Entropy also advertises over there. So like, gosh, all the court guilds that I think are there. Like, I'm mostly obviously connected with the Nightmare Court Sylvari guilds, but there's war bands, there's stuff for pretty much every race. There's Inquest, there's everything. So that would be the place I would say check out. Like, if you're not sure what you're looking for, you can just browse everything and see what jumps out at you.
Absolutely. If you're looking for a moot, there will be one for you.
Literally. And I would just say, like, if you know that you want to play a specific type of character, then put up a thread, advertise yourself, look at the guilds that are connected with the things that you're looking for, and just literally jump right into it. We had, back before Path of Fire dropped, we had an influx of new applicants for Pale, and there were so many. But they were all coming in, and a lot of them were people who were just buying the game for the first time because of Path of Fire. and had never roleplayed before, who most of their experience was with pen and paper and D&D. And the feedback we've got from those people who are still in the guild is that, MMORP is a lot different from D&D, but there are, various things that are similar. And if you really, really wanted to, you could still structure it like D&D. Like, a lot of events are structured in a D&D fashion. Like, we do sometimes use roles. I personally try to favor free like RP, where I personally hate rolling, but that's just me. Thank you, phone.
It can add a randomness to it, a potluck aspect, which can be helpful occasionally, especially if you're doing a structured, staged fight, where the outcome is not necessarily fixed. Rolling can be helpful, I think. But...
It can be. It definitely can be. And there are sometimes, like, some people in our guild roll for everything. Some people roll for nothing. We don't enforce roles unless it's something like the person running the event wants to enforce roles and do them in a very specific way. And then we'll do it that way. But yeah, like, the one thing I don't like about the dice is I have horrible luck with dice. And I have had the most nat ones on the stupid dice bot in our Discord channel. And I'm just like, my character would not fail every single thing. She has studied this for years. Like, she would not fail every single one.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, that's what I hate. It doesn't take into account my character's training, her history, her past.
Yeah.
So in that situation, it's a lot more helpful to actually structure it like D&D, where you have a stat sheet and the modifiers and everything to sort of help that.
There were a couple of ways to create a new character. You can jump in like you did raw and start, but if you could give a brand new role player some advice, what would you tell them is a comfortable, easy, kind of logical way to get into it?
One thing that I found helpful, if you don't want to just jump in with a brand new character straight off the bat, is to make your character, be it in character creation or conceptually, however you envision your character, and sort of, it sounds weird, but spend time with that character. One thing I did with one of my characters who I no longer play is I made her and I started doing some map completion with her and just sort of like getting a feel for the sort of weapons she favored, like on an IC level, and like how she fights, get a feel for her overall before I took her into any sort of scene or any kind of like group. Like, I knew at the time I was going to bring her into the guild that I was involved with at the time, but I didn't introduce her or even like submit the alt application until I knew who she was inside and out, like her motivations and all this stuff, and that took a couple of months to do, but it was worth it.
Do you recommend character sheets? Do you recommend like almost like a mood board on Pinterest or something like that to kind of get a feel for your character?
I think that people should do whatever they're comfortable with. Like, some people it's making Tumblr blogs for the character. Some people it's just making a full character sheet, like a D&D sheet. Some people it's writing a character biography to put on a forum, which tends to be what I do because I'm into the writing.
I was going to say, of course, if you don't have a guild at the moment, you can go over to the Guild Wars 2 community, and there are like individual stories that you could submit, so you can submit your characters that way to get some community feedback if you're interested.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what's really fun too, is I love just going over there and browsing the character bios just to like read them up and be like, oh, that's a really interesting concept for a character. I hadn't thought about that. I kind of want to, make these changes and make something that's sort of similar but my own spin on it. Or like a character that has these traits and like, oh, I never thought of giving a character that kind of trait. Like, you can sort of like, that almost sounds like ripping someone off, but like, I mean, that's sort of
it's inspiration. It's inspiration,
yeah,
isn't it?
Exactly. It's just it's the community. You're feeding off of the community, and as long as you're not like running with it and saying this is my idea and I made it and no one else has it ever in the world, like, okay, person, calm the hell down a little bit. But but I said hell, damn it.
It's okay. That's I don't think YouTube will mind that.
Okay. But yeah, so yeah, like I know some people who do like the blogs and stuff, like they'll make a Tumblr for their character. For my D&D character, I made a Pinterest board, and that helped a lot, and that was really fun. It just depends on the type of creativity you have, the ways that you like to express yourself. So I just think it's whatever works best for you. I mean, try it all. Go to Pinterest and make a board. If that's not working for you, try writing out some stories, like some backstory things. If that's not working for you, try doing some character writing. Because I've noticed like some people in my guilds over the years they've made journals also, but they're not kept up. They're only like backstory journals. So like they're snippets of things that happened in the character's past that influenced and shaped the character to who they are now, but they're just there for sort of informational purposes and to give the other players like a sort of insight out of character to how this, character sort of ticks. So.
Of course, roleplay isn't limited to being online and interacting with other people. Because my guild kind of dissipated, and roleplayers are fickle creatures, they will wander off to different games as the new shinies arrive on the market. And what I did was a lot of the way that I do my channel and a lot of the way I do the Crichton Herald reporting is all in character. So that's kind of my way of role-playing and responding to the story in a way which seems more logical or more kind of grounded. A lot of kidification is done to the story, I think, by ArenaNet, and so you can respond to it how you want, and you can roleplay how you want with or without others as well. I think that's...
Yeah. I think there's other types of like news style of guilds out there. There's some guilds who have publications that they make themselves. I know, as a joke, one time one of my prior guilds made Sylvari Vogue, and it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever been part of, but it was so much fun. And everyone submitted articles written like in character, like these were put together by our characters. My character would not have just like up and submitted something for this magazine, but someone told her she could write a fashion advice column, so she had a column called Ask Andrin, and it was ridiculous. And she just gave the most horrible advice, but it was all in character, and it was so much fun.
You've just got to go where the fun is. I mean, I know that some roleplay is quite structured and quite serious, but you can just have a really good laugh with it, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're not having fun, even if it's like really dark, dramatic, like life or death scenes, if you're not having fun, then you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
Like,
roleplay is consensual. You can tap out at any time. Just make sure you have a safe word.
Yeah, exactly. That would be another piece of advice I would give to someone who's wanting to get into RP, is to know how far you want to go with RP. If there are certain topics that you don't feel comfortable with, then make sure that you put that out there so people know what to not touch.
Yeah.
Like make sure that, if you're not okay with ERP, make sure that's stated.
Yeah.
If you're not okay with torture scenes, obviously that's going to be difficult if you're looking to get into Nightmare Court RP. But we do have some people in our guild who are not necessarily comfortable with overly dark torture scenes, and so they just don't participate in those, and that's completely fine.
And of course that's canon as well, because at least one of the Sylvari stories the starting story relating to the White Stag, there was one character who was very noble and honourable, but yet
Gavin.
Yeah, exactly. So you can play these things how you want. That there is a logical reason for someone who is good to be associated with an organisation that seems bad. You don't have to play it straight down the line.
Exactly, yeah. And there are so many grey areas. Like we had someone come in who was really drawn to that type of character, just like Gavin. He was like, I want someone who is very much like a good-natured hero type of person, but happens to be part of the Nightmare Court. And we're like, I mean, yeah, of course, like that's completely possible. However you want to have him, worked into the thing is totally fine. And he's actually done really good with that. Like his character is training to be a guard of the court, and he has challenged people to duels because they've impugned on people's honor, and it's really good. It's a really good dynamic that you don't necessarily see all the time.
You are a content creator.
Mm-hmm.
So would you like to talk about your content? I know that we're talking about roleplay here, and I think we've done that justice. I think we've laid the groundwork, and we've given some resources to people and given them a bit of an introduction. So let's talk about you for the last 10-20 minutes, because I think we've been yattering now for about an hour.
Okay.
Time flies.
Rip.
I'm conscious that, one, I don't want to keep you too long because you probably have things to do, and two, I need to make sure that I want to help you promote your channel and your work. So tell me about what you do.
I do a bit, I want to say a bit of everything, and that's sort of what my channel is ending up becoming, and that's kind of cool. But basically the videos that I do are Let's Plays of not just Guild Wars 2, but I also have some Dragon Age Let's Plays up there. But I do one Let's Play series is very structured, and it's me and another person from Guild Wars 2, and we just sort of like we're running around map completing and leveling and just playing and chatting. Another is where I run around with one of my RP friends, and we do the story, we explore things, we sit on all the chairs. So it's just sort of stuff like that. We're just playing the game and having fun. Well, we haven't really done too many tutorials, but that's on our agenda.
So do you do it, is this a solo endeavor, or do you do it with a friend?
The channel itself is solo, it's just me. But I do like to have people with me sometimes when I record, just because I do feed back and forth off other people's energy. And if like when I'm running around with my friend Merkay and we're doing the misadventures of Faye and Merkay, it's a lot more fun because like I've known her for years, I've RP'd with her for years, and we kind of go at it from like a role player's perspective. Like there was one time we were getting ready to do the first chapter of Living World season 4, and we got sidetracked for 40 minutes because we found a stove in a random building in Vabby. And we're just like, what is this? Why is this here? Like, and talking about like how we could role play there and like all this stuff. So like we find things along the way that we're like, oh, this would be a great spot for RP, and just like all these other things. So that's a lot of fun because, we're just having fun playing the game that we both love. But there are things that I do by myself. There are also things that we get more of the guild involved with. We have a podcast that kind of comes out about once a month at this point called Rolepayers Anonymous, and it's not anonymous at all, but but I basically bring in a bunch of people from the guild, whoever's free at the time, and we just talk about roleplay. And we sometimes have topics, and we sort of like just go on for an hour or so about, our characters or the topics. Like I think the most recent one we did was, I think we skipped March. Oops. But we did February for Valentine's Day. We did a podcast about dating in RP, like how your characters handle it, how you handle it, like all of these things, and mostly just telling the stories because people who don't necessarily roleplay don't see that side of the game. They don't understand it necessarily, so we just try and like break it down for people who might not be familiar with it.
Links in the description below to the podcast. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I mean, what I like to do, I love the game. I love all aspects of the game. I mean, not a massive fan of PvP, but that's neither here nor there. But I like to promote all these game types, and roleplay is really close to my heart. So it's been really lovely chatting with you. So, is there anything you'd like to say before we finish up?
If you enjoy D&D or fantasy, like writing or anything like that, definitely give roleplay a chance. But don't go in and troll the role players. For the love of all that is holy, please do not go in and spam your skills and jump up and down, and just please don't. Also, I would say not to judge all role players based on the brothel RP you see in Divinity's Reach or Evan Hawk. Like, we're not all like that.
It is not Perverts Anonymous, we promise.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending an hour with me and chatting about roleplay. I really would. I'd love to do it again.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation. It was fun. We have quite a lot in common with our RP craziness. Now, if you would like to be interviewed here too, there are links below to my Discord community where you can pop along and we can make something happen. I'm happy to do more roleplay interviews, more World v World interviews, some PvP love and raids, whatever takes your fancy, and I look forward to hearing from you. If you were thinking of joining the Guild Wars 2 community, there are referral links below to the free-to-play game, the Heart of Thorns expansion, and the Path of Fire expansion too. Thanks to the generosity of ArenaNet and their partner program, using these referral links directly supports my channel. I want to give a shout out to Craig, Ken Schneider, and Ada, my angelic patrons, and all my patrons who make it possible for me to dedicate as much time and effort and energy as I do to the channel. Thank you all very much. You allow me to do what I love, and I can never thank you all enough. I hope you will join me again. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.